Terrific. Thank you for joining everybody today. For all the state and territory energy offices on the line, I know you all have been working to coordinate across a variety of efficiency programs and activities with the rebate program, the workforce contractor training grants, which we're going to discuss today, and across federal agencies and utilities and a whole variety of programs. So appreciate your time today to hear from our presenter at SCEP. Really a first special thanks to DOE's workforce team and of course the rebate team as well related to this, Angela Dayton, Karen Zellmer, Joan Glickman, but especially our presenter today, Mary McPherson, the program manager from SCEP's workforce area. Appreciate her joining today, as well as our colleagues from the U.S. Department of Labor later on in today's call. And also just another thank you to Maddie Kohler on our team for helping to coordinate the information being provided today and for all the time folks are taking, dedicating to this work. With that, I think I'd like to turn it over to Mary so we can begin with the substance of today's remarks. And again, Mary, thanks for joining us today and putting this together.
Thanks so much, David. Just confirming you can see my screen as planned, right?
It looks great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks. I appreciate so many folks from states showing up today. I know I've met a number of you, but for those of you I haven't met, my name is Mary, and I am a workforce program manager in DOE's Office of State and Community Energy Programs. Before we dig into the content of this webinar, I just want to acknowledge that some of this might be overwhelming, and we know that you all have a lot going on right now, especially coming from DOE. So our goal is to really help you continue to do the incredible work you're already doing and that you have been doing for years. And we just encourage you to partner with folks who can help you design this program and really play to your strengths. We also just want to acknowledge that the application that we're going to be asking you to develop for this program, I think will really help you plan for a number of other DOE energy efficiency workforce development programs that we'll be announcing in the weeks and months to come. So I know we've heard from you concern about doing a bunch of work, maybe that only applies to one program, but we hope that the work you do for this program will holistically apply to some of your other programs and funding opportunities from DOE. So to give an overview of today's agenda, first, I'm going to start by giving a deep dive on the administrative and legal requirements document for this program that we announced last week. Then I'm going to speak to a few workforce development program strategies that you could use to inform your program. And lastly, I'm going to turn it over to our colleague, Pam Gerasimides with the Department of Labor, Employment and Training Administration, who will talk through what it looks like to partner with state workforce agencies that I know many of you have already worked with, but I think her overview will be really helpful just to kind of level set around the state and local public workforce system. All right, so now turning to the ALRD. It's only been out for a week, so I don't expect many of you to have dug into all the details, and that's completely fine. So the state-based home energy efficiency contractor training grants, which I'm going to call contractor training grants for short, provides funding to state energy offices to develop and implement a state workforce development plan to train residential energy efficiency and electrification contractors. This includes training contractors, but is not limited to training the contractors who will deliver DOE's home energy rebate programs, which we announced the administrative funding ALRD recently, and the next ALRD is coming soon. So the Contractor Training Grants Program was established through the Inflation Reduction Act, Section 50123, and we in the ALRD last week announced $150 million in formula funds to states. The total program budget is $200 million, and we're planning to do a competitive funding announcement, hopefully in the spring of 2024, for most of the remaining funding under this program. So the three goals as defined in statute for this program are: one, to reduce the cost of training contractor employees; 2, to provide testing and certification of contractors who are trained and educated under this program. And 3, to partner with nonprofit organizations to develop and implement state-sponsored workforce development plans. I thought it might be helpful to talk about some of the jobs that your training under this program could target. So I have a list of folks on this slide that is not all encompassing by any means, but under this program, you could train energy auditors, HVAC contractors, construction laborers, carpenters, sheet metal workers, electricians, or a number of other, you could train folks towards a number of other occupations. So I hope this is not the only list of folks you'll consider training, but it is energy efficiency and electrification focused. So the key dates, which might be kind of scary to share up front before we dig into the details, we're encouraging states to submit applications by September 30th of this year. But we understand this is a tight turnaround, and we will be accepting applications through December 31st of this year. We're encouraging you all to get your applications in sooner rather than later, because then we can get you the funding sooner to help you begin to address your workforce needs this year or as soon as possible. We expect award negotiations to happen in October of this year, and awards to be rolled out between November and February. We will issue funding in 2 installments to states. The first upon execution of the assistance agreement early on, and the second will be once you have submitted the results of your program evaluation to DOE and also communicated to DOE how you plan to incorporate the results of your evaluation into your program on an ongoing basis moving forward. I should also note that every state is eligible for an allocation under this program, but if you or another state is not interested in tapping into these formula funds, then DOE will add the funds that were not dispersed during the formula phase to the competitive funding application that will open up early next year. This is an overview of the application components. I have slides on most of these, but I just wanted to give a bird's eye view of what we're going to be asking for in this application. So the project narrative will be where you describe your ability to implement the grant project and include a comprehensive framework to describe all aspects of the proposed project and support the components on the slide below. The first of those components is performance metrics. We expect that states will establish program performance targets that are identified in the ALRD for new workers, existing workers, and/or contractor firms. States will use these targets to measure impact throughout the period of performance and report to DOE on a quarterly and annual basis. And I've included the list of performance metrics on this slide, but I won't read through them all right now. And I should have mentioned early on, I'm going to pause for questions immediately after this part of the presentation. But Maddie, if there's anything urgent or that requires clarification, feel free to interrupt me. The second component is the community benefits plan that many of you have already heard of. This should address 4 core elements, the first of which is supporting meaningful community and labor engagement. The second is investing in America's workforce, advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, and directing 40% of the benefits of these programs towards disadvantaged communities. And I should note the ALRD includes a bunch of options by which you all can address these 4 areas, and what's on the screen is certainly not all inclusive of the options that you'll have. So this is probably the bulkiest part of the application, the state workforce development plan. Through your workforce development plan, we're asking that you address the goals of the contractor training grants by articulating how your project is designed from both an operational and strategic level. So Part A of your workforce development plan, the first component of Part A is a residential energy workforce needs assessment. So we ask that your needs assessment provide a statement of need that clearly articulate the current supply of qualified skilled energy efficiency and electrification workers compared to projected future demand. We ask that you indicate the programs for which you will use contractor training grant funds to prepare a skilled energy efficiency workforce. And we also ask that you identify existing programs within a state's jurisdiction that meet residential energy contractor and workforce needs. As another component of this part of the workforce plan, we ask that you present labor market information produced by federal or state departments of labor, including current rates of employment in key occupations and forecast of growing or declining industries. I think this part in particular is where partnerships with your state and local workforce boards will be incredibly helpful. And Pam from DOL will help you all think through that a bit. We're also asking you to provide at least one of the following, the last two items on the screen, E or F, an assessment of residential and commercial energy auditor availability or readiness, and a skills assessment report in existing education and training programs, like those on new technologies, best practices, or new programs. So we really hope that any of you with existing workforce development programs can leverage those programs and those analyses to inform this workforce plan. So the second component of states' workforce development plans should address participant outreach, engagement, and a service plan. This will outline how the funds will be used to serve participants from at least one of the following audiences: new workers, especially those from disadvantaged communities who are new entrants to the workforce. You could also, or alternatively, you could target incumbent workers for upskilling or retraining. This could include maybe workers in industries that are adjacent to energy efficiency, and bring them into this industry. Or you could target new or existing residential energy contractors for training around leadership or financial management or responsible contracting, among other relevant skills. We ask that states identify what methods you use to determine the need to target those selected audiences, and also list the organizations that will be involved in identifying and recruiting potential participants. Sorry, this is pretty long-winded, so we'll pause for Q&A in a minute. Hopefully I haven't lost anyone's attention. But the third component and final component of your workforce plan is a statement of work with objectives, activities, and metrics. So this includes 3 to 5 strategic objectives that align program funds to identified workforce needs. We ask that you tell us how you define the metrics used to measure performance, explain the activities that will incentivize workers or employers to pursue skills development, and describe the plan for meeting workforce training needs after this DOE funding has been expended. A couple more slides on workforce development plan. As part B of your workforce plan, we ask that you answer a few questions. One is around how you will collaborate with local stakeholders in developing your plan, and how you will also partner with them to implement your plan. We ask that you list your existing statewide programs, initiatives, or partnerships that you will leverage when developing or implementing your plan. Tell us how you're going to benefit disadvantaged communities. Let us know what internal controls for performance reporting you have established through which you will identify, track, and report performance against your goals, activities, and metrics. And we ask that you let us know how you will facilitate continuous improvement to incorporate stakeholder feedback and improve program design and delivery. We are also asking states to, we're reserving a portion of funding to states until after you have conducted an evaluation of your program, which I mentioned earlier. And as part of states' applications, we're asking that you let us know what you expect your timeline to be for conducting that evaluation. And which evaluation questions you plan to use as part of that evaluation to improve program performance. So my last slide before I open it up for questions, we ask as part of your program evaluation that you include the following elements: progress against your goals, activities, and metrics, the feedback you collected from program participants, the process and program design improvements that you would pursue to increase the likelihood of meeting your goals, and a review of program impacts and recommendations for improvement as identified through the evaluation. So I'm happy to answer a few questions now. I saw there were a few in the chat, but I haven't read them yet.
I can go ahead and read a couple of them out,
Great.
Mary. There was a question about the slides, and I see that Angela answered towards the bottom here that you guys can share slides. Also, maybe clarify for Maria in the chat if it's okay if folks on this call share slides with their potential partners.
Absolutely. And we were thinking about offering another webinar in a few weeks that you could invite your partners to. And so please just keep that in mind. That's something we'll work with Maddie to sort out.
Yes. Next question in the chat is if we can get the December 31st final deadline in writing.
I imagine so. I'm just going to check with folks internally, but it's a great question.
Great. Next up from the questions, and forgive me for not knowing exactly which slide this was shared during, but the question is, are the performance metrics and targets binding? Are they a go, no-go metric for further funding?
We haven't built them in as go, no-go points. I think they will be binding, but that's something else I would love to follow up with my team about. Thanks for your question, Darren.
And I'm not sure if you're able to answer this one, Mary, but just in case, this is from Heidi in Pennsylvania. In formulating our application, it will be helpful to know if the rebates ALRD will require energy audits to be performed. And then goes on to say, well, do we require that certified energy auditors be used for the home efficiency rebate program? Not sure if you can answer that one, Mary, or if we should redirect that to someone else and Skip.
Yeah, I don't know if the home energy rebate programs will require energy audits. I do know that the home energy rebates programs will allow states to determine which certifications contractors must have in order to deliver those rebate funded measures. So that we'll have to check with another team on that. Yeah. And I know they're working feverishly to get their funding announcement finalized as well. But I appreciate that you're already connecting these programs together.
And then the last question we have for you in the chat says, part of our early funding application, I'm assuming this is the first ALRD for the rebates, focus on building a workforce needs assessment. Basically, a lot of what is covered in part 1, component 1 is what we're hoping to know, but the timing may not line up with this formula grant. Can we reference the workforce assessment generally in this application?
I think it's hard to say without knowing what's in the workforce needs assessment that you're already doing. I'm really excited that you're already working on one. That's fantastic. I think as much as possible, we'd love to work with you to leverage what you're doing, recognizing those timelines might not align. So that might require kind of further iteration.
And so, Amy, if you'd like to follow up, feel free to reach out to me or anyone else directly. And that is it for the questions in the chat.
Wonderful. Then I have a few more slides to share and we'll move on to those now. Thank you all for your questions. Okay, so now we're moving on to the second phase that will hopefully be less dry than the first. We're going to share a few workforce development strategies that I think are just generally recognized as best practices, but will be particularly helpful as you figure out your plans for the contractor training grant program. So the first recommendation is that you coordinate your contractor training grants with the home energy rebate programs. As some of you just alluded to, the home energy rebates team included in their administrative funding ALRD the opportunity to use some of those dollars for workforce planning. And so we encourage you to continue to do that if you're not already, because that will kind of help. You can use that funding as well as this funding for administrative planning around workforce needs. And we also recommend that you connect your contractor trainees with the rebate programs. It won't be a requirement that in order to deliver the home energy rebate programs that a contractor undergo training in this program, but I think it'll be really helpful to connect the folks who do undergo this training with the home energy rebates. I know that I might not have said that in the most clear way, so let me know if folks have questions on that point in particular. We also recommend that you determine internal staff capacity to implement the program. I know many states have experience with workforce development programs in energy efficiency, but not all do. And dedicated program staff is ideal. So I think early on, it'll be helpful to think through whether you might want to issue subawards for program implementation. We also recommend that you map the current supply of energy efficiency workers who are qualified against projected future demand for these workers, and then use the results of that exercise to target occupations for training under the contractor training grants. I definitely encourage you to use any existing state or local level analyses and connect with your workforce boards to understand what kind of analyses they've done, whether across sectors or sector specific in energy efficiency, and tap into the resources that they have.
Mary, can I jump in with a question from the audience?
Yeah.
So on the first bullet there about coordinating with the rebate programs, the question is how much detail, I'm paraphrasing here, but how much detail could states be expected to go into for their applications on that first bullet without knowing the complete guidance from the rebate programs?
Complete guidance from the rebate programs will be coming out very soon. And so I'm optimistic that you will have all the information you need in hand very soon, but I don't know the exact date. I just know it's imminent for the rebates guidance.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. So we also recommend that you define your target audience for training and make sure you engage them to understand their needs. The three target audiences that I described earlier and are listed in the ALRD are new workers, incumbent workers, and contractor firms. Needs will vary across these audiences, and that will require different program design considerations based on who you're targeting. It'll also be important to engage and identify employers early on to understand their needs. All training should lead to employment, and employers can be really key partners for training curriculum development to make sure that the curriculum are preparing workers to be able to have the skills that employers need and that employers want to hire, but also making sure the training meets the needs of those target audiences themselves. And early on, we recommend that you define the processes for connecting trainees with employers. That could be while training is still underway as part of on-the-job training or maybe mentorship planning, or that could be once a trainee finishes with their training program and it's time to figure out job placement needs. And lastly, one component of the ALRD that I forgot to mention is that we're asking states to establish an advisory group that includes target audience members and other key partners such as employers, workforce agencies, and others who you feel need to have a seat at the table where you are. I think this will really ensure a cycle of continuous feedback. And I know many of you already have energy efficiency collaboratives or climate advisory groups that maybe could tap into and expand for this purpose. So we've listed a few of the key partners that you might consider engaging on this slide, whether state and local workforce boards, state and local workforce and veterans agencies. Utilities will be key partners since many of them deliver their own energy efficiency programs. and can speak to their workforce shortages in delivering those programs. State service commissions and public service commissions, faith-based nonprofits, and educational institutions will be key as well. But we recognize this will vary by state. So once you've defined your target audience, it'll be key to identify the appropriate strategies for recruiting them and the appropriate partners to help you recruit those folks. It'll also be key to define wraparound services and key partners for providing these wraparound services, such as community-based organizations or community colleges. As many of you already know, I think the success of a worker going through training is as much about how they're doing in the classroom, but also how they're positioned for success outside of the classroom. And these wraparound services can help make sure that a trainee's needs are being met outside of the classroom. We encourage states to facilitate on-the-job learning and help individuals identify career pathways, making sure that folks are aware of opportunities for advancement in the residential or broadly the energy efficiency space. And this could happen through apprenticeships or pre-apprenticeship programs, also known as apprenticeship readiness programs. And as I've mentioned before, and Pam will dig into in greater detail, we suggest that you leverage educational and financial resources from state and local workforce boards. Many of these agencies already have longstanding programs that offer wraparound services or soft skill development to individuals. So you certainly don't have to start from scratch or reinvent the wheel in your own program development. This is my last slide before opening it up one more time for questions. So we also recommend that you train towards industry recognized credentials. In the ALRD, we define a list of qualified certifications that states can train people towards, but we also invite you to submit the certifications that you would like to train people towards, and we'll review those and consider adding those to the list. So that list is not yet all inclusive or written in stone. It will also be key to include soft skill development in training curriculum, such as communication skills, social skills, or problem solving, self-awareness, and financial literacy are a few examples. And community-based nonprofits and third-party workforce development providers will be really key for building out that soft skill development infrastructure. Lastly, if you do decide to support contractor firms, I think it's important to be aware of the opportunity to provide them with both professional development and technical service sharpening. For example, teaching them how to offer heat pumps, how to install heat pumps. About 60% of the home performance contracting industry has fewer than 20 employees, and about 80% has under 60 employees. So these businesses are really small, and many of them, I think, stand to benefit from services that really target business owners to maybe provide them back office support as well as technical training. We also recommend, if you do decide to pursue this path of targeting contractor firms, to facilitate inclusive entrepreneurship, whether by supporting diverse business enterprises or helping them access state level certifications and licenses, or maybe helping them access utility energy efficiency programs as a way to bolster their businesses. I think the options are limitless here. So I can answer, I think, about 5 minutes worth of questions if folks have them, and then I'll turn it over to Pam.
Thank you. And we got some more questions in the chat that I will relay to you. The first is if DOE has any guidance on the number of workers, on the number of qualified energy efficiency workers needed to say weatherize 1,000 homes, those kinds of estimates.
I do not offhand.
Let's see. The next question is actually there's several along the lines of if these grants can be used for programs that provide wraparound services to participants.
Yes, they can. States, if you include in your workforce development plan, if you articulate how that will help you reach your target audience, we're open to that. Yeah.
Great. And I see also for folks that might not have their eye in the chat that Sandy added a link to the user report. Sandy, is there anything you wanted to say about what's in that report?
Thanks, Maddie. Nothing major other than if you're looking for help with some preliminary data or analyses, the user can be a helpful starting point, and we're happy to connect with you on that if you'd like.
Great flag. Thank you, Sandy.
And I see Ryan, you have your hand up. If you want to unmute, feel free.
Yeah, thanks, Maddie. And thank you, Mary, for the presentation. This is a two-parter. The first is, I think I missed something. Could you kind of re-clarify the September 30th that's in the ALRD deadline versus the December 31st deadline I think you mentioned?
Yeah, yes. So we're encouraging states to submit their application by September 30th, and that's the deadline we have in the ALRD. But we will accept applications submitted by December 31st. And it's not, I don't believe that December 31st deadline is in writing anywhere. And someone asked if we could put it in writing. And so I'm going to look into that internally.
Okay. And this is more of an observation, so not necessarily needing a response to it, but for us, as we've been trying to contemplate, the rebate programs with the limited information we have, and then with the workforce development plan, the contractor training grant. Yes, it'll be great once the ALRD is released to be able to utilize that information, but we won't really know where all of the synergies and efficiencies that we can leverage this grant with the other rebate programs will be until we really get in the meat of the planning and developing those plans, which we anticipate, kind of based on our conversations with some program administrators, is going to take months to develop. So the December 31st deadline will certainly help, but it may be even longer if we really want to be as efficient and really lock down what our programs are going to look like for the rebates, and then be able to really make efficient use of the contractor training grants. I'm sure we can make do doing it kind of disparate, but that would just be an observation I would share for DOE's consideration. Thank you.
Thanks for the feedback, Ryan.
We have one last question going back to the ALRD portion of the slides, which is, can you explain what binding metrics mean? Does that mean that any metrics or goals that the state sets, a state must meet them in order to receive funding?
I might like to follow up with my general counsel on that so as not to misspeak, but I appreciate the question and recognize we could be clearer on that front.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks. Great. So that covers the questions in the chat. I think that puts us right on time for me to hand it over. So I'm now excited to introduce Pam Gerasimides. She is the Regional Administrator of the Department of Labor, Employment and Training Administration, and will be presenting to us on the state and public workforce system. Pam, are you with us?
I am. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, awesome. So good afternoon, everyone. Here's my slide deck. So I'm Pam Gerasimides, RA in Region 5. I'm based out of Chicago, and we oversee 10 states. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the regional structure in a little bit. Just by way of background, I used to work for the state of Pennsylvania. I started my workforce development career for the state of Pennsylvania, so in the state agency there. And the majority of my career I spent with an association that represented state workforce development agencies, similar to this, the organization that's hosting us today. So it's really nice to be here, and I'm hoping that we could create some bridges and good conversation going. And I want to thank Mary for inviting me here today. So let's see, let me flip to the next slide. So I want to tell you a little bit of what I'm going to cover with you today. I'm going to talk to you about why you should care about the workforce development system. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the why, the mission behind the workforce development system. Talk to you about who are the key players and what does this ecosystem look like, and then talk more about the what. What are the programs and what are the services that the system delivers? Give you a sense of how large or what the activities look like by the numbers. And then I'm going to conclude by just giving you a quick overview of what the federal regional offices where I sit actually and some parting thoughts around that. So let's go to the next slide. So I'm going to start with the what's in it for me, or the WIFM, or as I like to say, it's the last word first. So the publicly workforce development system can help you, your grantees, your contractors with the activities that you see there. So access to a diverse pool of workers. These are your recruitment needs right now. From untapped pool of reentering workers to skilled, recently employed workers and registered apprentices in all trades. We could focus on talent pipeline development and sector strategies. So we could help you build a talent pipeline with specialized training wrapped around specific sectors. The workforce development system also focuses on supportive services. So we provide access to a full array of supportive services and can manage these on an individual level to keep your workforce in training or on the job. And of course, access to quality vetted training providers. This is called you might hear this word, ETPL. This is the eligible training provider list. So that these are the institutions that help the workers and the trainees get any certifications or upskilling that is required, and then help you meet equity goals and milestones, kind of depending on what's in the grant programs that you're engaged in. So let's now talk about what the mission is. That's your WIFM, but here's the mission of the workforce system. So the system overall is designed to help job seekers access employment, education, training, and supportive services to succeed in the labor market. And then also to match the employers with the skilled workers that need to compete, that they need in order to compete in the economy. So the workforce system is also a connector and kind of convener in the community. Think of it as the human capital strategy system contributing to the efficiency of the workforce of the U.S. Labor market. So at the heart of this, it's a demand and supply model. Employers need workers, that's the demand, and then the workers looking for jobs. This is our supply. And ETA helps lead the Employment and Training Administration, which is an office under the U.S. Department of Labor, leads the ecosystem to provide these services on both sides for employers and job seekers. And we do this by following the bullets that you see there. We provide high quality employment services. We fund grants for the compilation of labor market information. And so here's for workers to make informed decisions about their careers, but also for our grantees, that they could make informed decisions about training priorities and workforce services in their local areas. Then there's, of course, the job training piece around the in-demand occupations. And lastly is income maintenance, and I'm referencing here the unemployment insurance programs. So let's go to the next slide. So this is what the Department of Labor ecosystem looks like. It shows you how the funding flows, right? So we start from the Employment and Training Administration and the U.S. Department of Labor, which provides funding and sets program regulations, the performance goals and oversight. The majority, not all of the ETA budget is allocated to states following this model here. And there is a prescribed formula in the authorizing legislation. So that's how the funding flows down to the states. And of course, there are other discretionary and competitive grants that the community applies to the Department of Labor. At the state level, there's your state workforce agency, which administers the programs, but it also staffs the state workforce development board. This is a governor appointed board. The majority of it, 51% of it, has to be employers. And this group provides sort of the systemic technology framework, policies, planning guidance, and monitoring down to the local level and coordinates the local outlets. Moving down, you're at the local workforce development boards. These are sort of analogous to the state board, and they administer, but focus, of course, in a specific area. They administer the programs at the local level, and they establish and oversee different mixes of programs and services at what we call American Job Centers, which is sort of the physical manifestation of this world. At these centers, people could come and get, multiple services in a single place to make it easier to assist the unemployed and the underemployed and the incumbent workers in finding employment and obtaining the appropriate supportive services. So just an important note, I think, on this slide is to tell you that there's a lot of flexibility between the different levels. So in some cases, you would be working directly with your state workforce agency. In some cases, depending on what you're looking for, you could be working with a prominent local workforce development board, either in an urban or a rural setting. So let's go to the next slide. So I talked about the why and the who. Here is what it actually looks like. I'm sort of boiling the ocean for you here, but and there's a lot of variation and flavor within these, but these are the key workforce development programs. WIOA, as we refer to it for short, is really the job training side of the house. Labor market information, I think, is sort of self-explanatory. The employment services provides all kinds of career services. RESEA is employment services for unemployed folks. Veterans Employment Services focuses on veterans who have barriers to employment. And then finally, the Unemployment Insurance Program. And believe you me, during the pandemic, we had a lot of different folks from many different occupations and educational levels in the UI system. So while there are many flavors of programs that target customers, there is one front door, and there's pretty much a workforce development program for everyone. So this is a universal system with a focus on serving the special pipelines of job seekers. And what I mean by that is it could be youth, veterans, people with disabilities, older workers, returning citizens, dislocated workers, migrant and seasonal farm workers. I mean, it's a lot of different things. And of course, business is the other key customer. So I mentioned that there's a physical manifestation. The brick and mortar is the American Job Center. It could be called a career one-stop in some states, or a one-stop center. But there's also a lot of services that were provided in a self-service style. So virtually, even before the pandemic, but then after the pandemic, this became another key component of how these services are delivered. And you see there all kinds of social services and systems that the workforce development system connects to, including childcare, mental health, housing, and transportation. So let's go on to the next set of slides. I wanted to do just a little bit more of a deep dive as to what do we mean? What are these kinds of activities, just to make it a little bit more tangible and real. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but I'm going to kind of touch on some of these and explain. So this is from the job seeker perspective. You see skills assessments. So what do we mean there? They do assessments around literacy and numeracy and language proficiency and aptitude, abilities, and skills gaps. Labor exchange activities involve things like job search and job matching, so job banks, placement assistance, counseling, career counseling, workshops on how to interview and how to write your resume. Labor market information. This looks at skills needed in various jobs, and then local in-demand occupations information, and what are those jobs and where are they, and what kind of prevailing wages do they have, and what do I need to do to get to those positions, which actually leads to your individualized training plan below. But let's talk about, there's a whole host of like on-the-job work kind of activities that could happen, internships and shadowing, on the job training, all kinds of things there. I'll give you a little flavor of the workforce preparation types of activities. Here we're talking about getting folks educated around learning skills, continuous learning, digital dexterity, communication skills, interviewing skills, punctuality, professional conduct to prepare individuals for employment or training. And then again, around the sort of referrals to specialized resources, I mentioned childcare and transportation and mental health, but there's also financial literacy, there's SNAP, there's vocational rehabilitation for those who have disabilities, adult education, and much more. On the next slide, I want to tell you what we do for the business side of the house, from the business side of the house. So recruiting and hiring resources, and I mentioned state job banks, the resume banks, and job matching, but the system also does career fairs and specialized outreach and recruitment and screening for employers, and many have special and personalized account representative for business. There's also rapid response for dislocated workers, going on site to provide the labor market information, talking about to the employer about the tax credits that they could have, fidelity bonding, and layoff aversion. I discussed the worker training options, ranging, anywhere from the worker work preparation skills to apprenticeships, and tapping into the skilled workers from area layoffs. And then the final piece is actually offering the opportunity for the employers and the businesses to engage and lead the local workforce development strategy. So sitting on the workforce boards and the industry advisory groups and sector partnerships. A little now, let's talk a little bit about sort of the by the numbers piece that I mentioned. There's these programs run in all the states and the territories. Last year for FY23, just for that WIOA piece, that was 4.15 billion for these programs. On the next slide, we have some information that I drew out of some of our reports. In September and December of 22, we served about 9.3 and 9.1 million people. These were folks that were enrolled and registered for a lot of our services. To that number, you could add, millions more who access virtual services and never have to actually register for those. On the next slide, I just gave you a little bit more of a breakdown of those numbers. You could also see all the different flavors within the bigger program categories that I mentioned to you. We could go to the next one. Here, there's 1,273 comprehensive centers across the United States. The number under each of the map, the states there shows you how many are in your particular state. And it obviously you see California there with 91 as the lead. And then in the next slide, these are the affiliate centers. The affiliate centers are run in partner facilities. It doesn't include the entire, kit and caboodle of all the programs that are available. So I have 2 more slides to share with you. And the next one, I wanted to talk a little bit about what it looks like in the national office. So in terms of the agency structure, there's the national office in DC and then the 6 regional offices. I run Chicago Region 5. That's about 1/5 of the national activity in this system. We are responsible for 10 states. That's Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Michigan, Minnesota, Nebraska, Ohio, and Wisconsin. And so if these states are in the room here listening to me, I would really be really open to connecting you connecting you with the right folks in your state if you don't have those kinds of relationships, or if you want to speak to a specific local, I could help accommodate that too. So in my region, we oversee about 500 grants. As I said, there's a lot of discretionary in addition to the formula grants. And that reflects about a $6 billion investment on a rolling every year. There's a total of 46 of us working out in Region 5. The national office sets the agency priorities and develops policy and makes the funding decisions. And in the regional offices, we're all like about the post-award phase. So we have 3 functions. We do oversight, and that means monitoring to ensure the integrity of the dollars, but we also provide compliance assistance and then also technical assistance to create these kinds of, pushing the envelope forward and innovating and incorporating new ideas and setting the stage for these types of relationships. And then just a few parting thoughts from me on the next slide. please engage with the workforce system now and upfront. Don't wait until the grant has been awarded to reach out to workforce. We've included a link here to the state offices. Some of this is not the most recent. So I've also included a link down below to your regional offices, to my counterparts. I'd be more than happy to connect you with those folks, and they could give you, to make sure that you have the right information. And then the other thing you need to be aware of is that sometimes the workforce programs are split between a couple of different agencies in some of the states. So, the workforce program might reside in more than 2 states. For example, in Illinois, the employment services is in one agency, and the job training piece is in a different agency. So ask them for input on the grant application to make sure that they could help you meet the proposed program goals, that they're achievable. But even if it isn't for a specific grant application that's pending, I'm sure there's plenty of work that you're doing right now that has workforce components. So that's something that you could be exploring too. And just, reach out to them, your counterparts in the state workforce agency, and ask for their partnership and in writing and administrating that grant. And the last piece here is talking to the regional administrators, and we for sure could put you in touch with the right folks. I want to tell the people in the room who are from Region 5, the states I mentioned, but also Region 3, we're going to have a regional convening in Chicago, November 14th and 15th, and I would appreciate to try to make those connections with you, with your counterparts and some of the locals that will also be there. So with that, if you have any questions that you'd like me to address now, my email is on the slide deck. You could reach out to me at any time, and I look forward to working with DOE and with NASEO to answer any questions. Oh, I would also add, just going back, there's also, as I said, NASWA, which is the State Association of Workforce Agencies, state workforce agencies, and that's another great resource. I believe in creating as many connections that you feel comfortable and exploring. So that's also another resource that you could have. So with that, let me see, are there any questions for me?
You did get one in the chat, Pam, and this is from one of your first slides. And the question is, are those primary programs ones that fund and host workforce training such that we might channel grants through them, or are there some that might be more appropriate than others?
So it's not as complicated as I'm going to make it sound, but for example, all of these pieces had been authorized by different pieces of legislation, but it's all been incorporated under the WIOA umbrella. So, so the workforce development system, broadly speaking, in the 3 top ones are in one umbrella. The second, the Veterans Employment Services, although is set up separately in the Department of Labor, is also delivered in the local area and the state, from the same state agency. So all of those are tied together today, and all those functions are under one piece. And yes, so this would be the place you would go. Does that answer that?
I think so, but Tina, please jump in if you have any follow-ups. And if folks have any other questions, add them to the chat or raise your hand. Now is the time, or we have a couple minutes left.
While folks are thinking, I just wanted to throw out a question for you all. If you have any input on it, we have some funds available for technical assistance around the contractor training grants, but we want to make sure that technical assistance is informed by your needs. So are there any specific aspects of the contractor training grants or workforce development plan requirements that you anticipate needing technical assistance around, or might otherwise find challenging? Please let us know. And the only other plug I'll make is that I am putting into the chat and on the screen a shared inbox through which we will answer questions that you all have, and then we'll post them on a public facing webpage to make sure that everyone has access to the answers to those questions. So I'll put that in the chat now. but we'll work to answer all those questions within only a handful of days. Thanks.
Since I'm here, I would love to ask the folks in the room, and especially the ones who are in my region, are there any initiatives right now that you're working with the workforce development system, either at the state or a local level? And you could reply in the chat. I would be curious if there's any current relationships that exist at this point. Don't all answer at the same time.
Hi, Pam. This is Sandy at NASEO. NASEO just wrapped up an initiative earlier this year to help connect state energy offices with state workforce agencies in a handful of states, including Pennsylvania, Colorado, and there were some good outcomes. I'll post the sort of findings report into the chat in case you're interested in
Yeah,
learning more,
I
and
would
happy to
love
connect.
see that. I would, and sort of force multiply that out.
I do think one of the initial challenges, and I don't know if this is still true like many months later, but one thing that we heard from the workforce agencies is that they try to be really responsive to employers in their state. And so if the employers aren't asking for clean energy workers, then it's really hard to justify programming around it. And so that felt like just another sort of piece of the puzzle that needed to be addressed, really engaging employers and industry around the need to grow the workforce. And I feel like these contractor training grants might help spark that because there's no money behind it. But I'm just curious if you've run into that issue and if you have any guidance on that.
Yeah, it is a system that's driven by sort of demand, right, and what employers want, but also governor priorities and local priorities. And of course, they always are responsive to grants that are out there. So I think if you could point to the need that's going to be emerging and the number of jobs that are expected to be delivered in a local area, I think it would be a great argument to put that in front of them. Here's the kind of thing that's going to happen, and this is what these employers will need to hire for. So I think putting the numbers behind something is what's so critical here.
Yeah, thanks so much. That's great advice.
I see the South Carolina comment. Great. I'm in the list.
And with the last couple of minutes that we have, Pam or Mary, is there any closing remarks you want to share?
Nothing major for me. Just want to recognize that we hope this has been beneficial, and we really want to make ourselves available for you and your partners. So we'll work with Maddie to schedule another webinar that could reach a wider audience and the folks that you're partnering with or interested in partnering with. And we know we just threw a lot of information at you, so please let us know how we can clarify anything. We'll work to get answers to the questions that you posed during our presentation today. Thanks for your time.
And thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Pam.
Thanks, guys, both for being here, and for the states on the line. You certainly know where to find me if you have any follow-up questions or concerns. Otherwise, looking forward to seeing all of you again soon. Thank you, everybody.